SportsNite, your home for all SU sports talk.
Syracuse players, they don't find a player boxed out. They turn around and try to jump up and grab the ball. That's not rebounding. That's not boxing out. That's lazy.
It is nowhere close to an overreaction to say that they can go 500 or better in ACC play.
I think there's something to be said about that specific phenomenon. 5 guys saying there's no backup plan. It's just us.
Breaking down everything from around the hill.
When you get doubled up on your shots and even one more to put a cherry on top, there's no possible way you can win a lacrosse game.
You can tell it just dissipates out of nowhere. And it's the in-game adjustments that have hurt Syracuse.
And giving hot takes along the way.
Naheem McLeod, they want him to be Jesse Edwards, and he just isn't.
Fran Brown is a home run hire for Syracuse.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or interact with us on social media at WAER Sports Talk. It's Sports Night, and it starts right now.
Hello and welcome into Sports Night. I'm Griffin Marcy alongside Max Gifford, taking you up until 9 p.m. here on WAER. We're going to be talking all about Syracuse's game last week against UNLV, getting into this week's game tomorrow against NC State, and then we'll get around a little bit around the hill later in the evening. But if you want to get involved, talk to us, give us a call at 315-443-2011 or text us at 315-556-3929. We're also on Twitter at WAER Sports Talk, and you can stream us live on YouTube. But before we get right into it, Max, how's your day going this week?
You know, autumn's arrived. It feels like a little bit of the winds have changed at this point. Weather was super nice today, though, but definitely got a little chilly as of last week.
Yesterday was a little chilly. They did just turn the heat on in my house, so I was pretty excited about that. It's been pretty
Was the heat not on?
No, the heat just turned on for the first time yesterday. Otherwise, it's been absolutely freezing.
Well, I'm glad you're here right now with me.
Exactly. We're having some fun. But we'll get into it now. Enough without the weather. We could talk about the weather in Vegas last week. A lot different than here in Syracuse. But
We're
week...
second alert weather here on WAER.
You're absolutely right. Last week, Syracuse goes on the road to Vegas on a Friday night, beats UNLV 44-41. It was a game that, came down to the wire, out in overtime. LaQuint Allen, the big show-stopping touchdown at the end. But the biggest thing that stuck out of this game, football is a 3-phases game. Offense, defense, special teams. And boy, was the special teams a problem out there.
What's it go? What's the saying? Special teams, special players, whatever it is, Syracuse.
Special plays.
Special plays. Whatever it is, Syracuse didn't do any of those in terms of the special teams. You talk about 2 blocked punts in one game. You talk about 2 blocked punts this season, I should say. One this game that resulted in a UNLV touchdown. I mean, it's kind of been a crapshoot for who's kicking the balls at this point. You have Jaden O for the Orange out there doing all the field goal kicking at this point, which go back to the Holy Cross game. You thought, okay, maybe Jaden O is just getting rotated in. But now it's become he is the regular kicker, and it looks like he's going to continue to be that regular kicker for the Orange. That wasn't the expectation coming into this season, especially when you have guys like Denneberg, who was super consistent last year, and you've also got Jack Stonehouse, who's been a really consistent punter. He made the All-ACC team last year, Griffin.
Yes, you mentioned, you don't come into this year, expect Jaden O, a freshman, to play. You have your junior kicker in Brady Denneberg, expecting him to take all these kicks. But against Holy Cross, they go 0 for 3 as a team, leaving a bunch of points on the board. You leave 9 points on the board there. Not something you can have going later into the season. And these special teams just been an issue all season long. You go back to Georgia Tech, they had a blocked punt, a blocked field goal, and they don't recover an onside kick. These opportunities that the mistakes keep building. The further you get into the season, the further you get into conference play on the road, and the games like tomorrow night down in Raleigh, you can't have these mistakes and just points and lapses going through the rest of the season.
It's almost like the topic was tabled until right after this UNLV game, right when the gauntlet of ACC play begins for Syracuse. Because you talked about that Georgia Tech game, that was a problem, but I think because of how well the offense performed and how well the defense performed in that game, standing up to what was at the time a ranked Georgia Tech team, you had the thought in the back of your mind like, okay, just special teams, just one game, it's never really been a problem. Okay, you play Holy Cross. It's a really big problem. Granted, it's Holy Cross is what everyone said. But then against UNLV, the same problems continue to linger. So it just became a question of how do the Orange fix this? And that was one of the first questions that was asked in the post-game presser to Fran Brown.
Yeah, I mean, when these same problems continue over and over, it's perfectly acceptable for people to start asking questions. Hey, what's going on? How can we address this? And if situations aren't going to be handled, you're going to continue to see the same mistakes. That's where people are going to start to get frustrated. But you mentioned that question of asking Fran Brown. Here's what he had to say when asked about the special teams issues against UNLV on Friday. What's going on? How can we address this?
I'm going to work myself to fix it. I'm going to
If situations aren't going to be handled, you're going to continue to see the same mistakes. That's where people are going to start to get frustrated. But you mentioned that question of asking Fran Brown. Here's what he had to say when asked about the special teams issues against UNLV on Friday. What's going on? How
I'm going to work myself to fix it. I'm going to look at different things. I'm going to call some guys that I, besides talking with our strength coach, and I'm going to just call some guys that I truly trust in the industry that I think are really, really good, like high-level thinkers of it, and just see what's the best way to fix it before NC State. And not saying like, oh, I got a long-term piece, but what would you do right now before NC State if you were to go through this? And I'm going to just call a few head coaches that I truly respect and care about a lot.
So, Max, that's obviously a really big soundbite from Coach Fran there. I've seen a lot of different takeaways.
I don't really care about the rest of it. I just want to focus on that first part.
All right, let's hear it.
I'm going to call some people as a head football coach. I got to ask someone else how to coach my football team who's not my special teams coach.
That's where I'm at, too. I'm okay. What is James Villano doing there?
Here's so I've been saying this all week. I've been saying this all week long. I've gotten some flack for it. Adults, coaches, whoever, everyone needs help. That's the nature
Absolutely
of life.
fair.
Everyone needs help. Everyone needs to seek advice to get help if they have problems or if there are problems with a certain entity in the world. The issue here is that Fran Brown has a special teams coach in James Villano. You have plenty of outlets around your team to use as those sources to fix these problems for something I would say is pretty minuscule as special teams like we talked about.
Oh, I definitely am not going to give it minuscule at this point. I think
you wouldn't say it's minuscule at this point?
I think it's catastrophe at this point.
Okay. But, so to finish my point, though, you have to call other people outside of your organization to get advice on how to fix this. That's unacceptable. Here's the thing. It's the unacceptable thing to say to the media.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Say what you want about being honest. I just don't think that was the right way to go.
Yes, I appreciate the honesty approach there, but like you said, why is that going out in the public? If that's a conversation, if you want to call some of your contacts from your time over at Georgia or any other spots throughout your coaching career, why is that acceptable? Let me know what you guys think about that. Give us a call at 315-443-2011 or text us at 315-556-39. We're also on Twitter at WAER Sports Talk, and you can watch us live on YouTube, WAER Sports Talk on YouTube. But I want to get involved. I want you guys to get involved. Are we on an island here? Do we think this is crazy for him to say? Because personally, I do. Like you, I agree with what you said. I don't necessarily have a problem with it actually being done, but why are we telling the rest of the world, the rest of the community, like, hey, I need to go out and ask other questions? That's something that should be stayed in the building. Why are we not handling that with our special teams department and Coach James Villano? What's going on there? Why are we not allowing these opportunities to continue to flourish?
What you also, I guess, put out there is that the stuff that you're imparting on your coaching staff is simply not working.
Yes. Then that's not something a message you want to spread is like, hey, what I'm saying isn't working. That's not a message you want to display to the team. It's not something you want to say to the media. I mean, you want to be able to breed confidence in doing that. That's just not what that statement does.
So I said this statement earlier this week on another program, and someone had a comment. They said, smart people come up with good ideas. Really smart people steal the best practices in the industry. So which one is Fran in this situation?
I think he's going to be the one stealing the best practices. I know they asked him about it later in the week. Like on Monday's press conference, I was there. They asked, who did you call? What did they tell you? And, of course, very good of him to say, like, I'm not telling you who I called. Which
he shouldn't. He should never do that.
Yeah, because then he's saying, like, if I tell you who I called, you're going to see what they do, and then you'll be able to adjust to that. So really good on that. The original, statement, I just don't understand the concept of doing that. It just doesn't make sense to me. But beyond this, special teams, that was one of the bad phases of this game. Let's go to one of the more positive phases of this game.
Oh, look at you being positive.
Well, we're all about having fun here on a Friday night on SportsNite. But one of the more positive things, offense obviously scores 44 points, and you welcome back a big piece in Aronde Getz. 10 catches, 140 yards on 14 targets. That's huge to bring back your best weapon on offense.
And considering that the past 2 weeks he had only had a combined 16 yards in the two games between Stanford and Holy Cross. I mean, he was doing more blocking at some points than he was actually going out for receptions. Now, say what you will about Kyle McCord. Some of those throws in the Holy Cross game, a little bit off target, definitely wasn't hitting his mark as much as he normally has been, especially with some other receivers. But what was fun to see about Gadsden in this UNLV game is when he was making catches, he was actually, getting outside. He was getting outside in the slants, wasn't necessarily overdoing it in a way. I think sometimes, especially with how it was with Rondé Gadsden and Garrett Trader in that connection, Gadsden just could kind of run out wherever he wanted, and he just had to make whatever catch.
Yeah, it would be straight rolling out. You just got to find the soft spot.
Chances are the ball is coming to you.
Yes, and I think
so you didn't have to work for it.
Yes, bringing Gadsden back into this offense, like we just talked about, 10 catches this week. In the previous 2 weeks, he had 3 catches for 14 yards in 2 games. That's ridiculous for your best player. But bringing him back into the fold of the offense it opens up things for the rest of your team. I mean, if you're going to have Gadsden working the middle of the field or working the outside, he will draw so much attention. That's a future NFL player and tight end there. So putting the effort and energy on him is going to leave room open for more targets on offense, and just continuing to feed him, which is going to help this offense move forward constantly.
We just talked about it a little. The fact that he is an NFL talent should already tell you enough, and the fact that all of these different guards or all these different defenses now have to adjust to the fact that Rondé Gadsden is back into the fold for Syracuse, while also dealing with some of these big threats that we've seen these last couple of weeks. You can name a couple with Jackson Meeks, who's been a lethal receiving option as of late. Umari Hatcher has really gotten involved. Even guys like Trevor Pena, who've cooled down a little from the start of the season, but are still a lot to offer to this squad. There's even talks about Justice Ross Simmons coming back to this lineup soon. So if you have all those different pieces and they start to work together as a cohesive unit, and it really opens up this field, like you mentioned, spreads out the defense, I think Syracuse could be in for a lot of really good offensive games, which Fran Brown necessarily hasn't been worried about, making sure that the offense is clicking at all times.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned these guys. Some guys have just opened up. Some guys, it's kind of hot and cold. Like this week, Jackson Meeks the week before went crazy. He had like 10 catches for 140 yards and a touchdown. This week, still has another solid week. 8 catches, 67 yards in the score. Trevor Pena, same line, 8 for 67. LaQuint Allen with 9 catches. Part of that, so many different variety in offense, comes from Kyle McCord's 63 attempts. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I think having, just like you said, this versatility on offense makes it so much harder for defenses to approach you. It can't just be, they're going to key on Rondé. But, you got weapons on the outside, and you don't know which weapon it's going to be either, especially when you got, like, LaQuint Allen coming out of the backfield, 9 catches,
we haven't even said his name this show yet.
And that's incredible. After his 4 touchdowns against UNLV the other day, that was a performance that, if I had to think of one word, what would it be? Dart.
Oh, my gosh. Really? You had to throw that out there?
I mean, it was detailed.
I mean, did you listen to Austin Barrick's piece about toughness?
I did. It was really good.
It was really good. He talked about LaQuint Allen being tough in particular.
Talk about LaQuint's toughness. How about that play at the end of the game there with Quint barreling over the defender?
That was tough.
Yes.
That was the epitome of tough.
Getting into the end zone, just putting the stamp on the game right there was huge, and that's just another weapon they have on offense. But plays like that don't happen, like we said, if we're not continuously having the threat of Rondé Gadsden.
And if you spread out, if you have sort of the offense spread out with Gadsden, and remember, Gadsden wasn't necessarily involved a ton in those last couple of games, so I'm sure it sort of took a little toll on himself sort of mentally. But when asked about his mentality this past week, here's what he had to say.
No, not really. Just keeping it one day at a time and one play at a time, throughout the game. Didn't know what could have happened this game. This could have been the game that I had, or it could have been a repeat of the last 2 weeks. You never know. But as long as we walk away with the win, that's all that matters.
That's a great way to think about it. Putting the team first, which is awesome for a guy that might be in the NFL in a couple of years and could be dazzling us, and he could be on all our fantasy teams.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Because right now my fantasy team, tight ends, kind of a weak spot. But we're not going to talk about that. But we talked about, last couple weeks, Rondé not getting very involved, which is surprising because it's not like the passing volume wasn't there. Kyle McCord threw for 50 times against Holy Cross, 63 times last week, the most by any quarterback in the country this year. So with all this changing of the guard here on offense, which is in the past it's been a little bit more of a running focused team, Kyle McCord's really been airing it out this year. That's why it's kind of been surprising of Gadsden to be kind of a weak spot. But Max, what do you think about the overall just volume of passing on offense, it's been really kind of uncharacteristic.
I mean, Kyle McCord certainly hasn't seemed unfazed by the fact that he's continuing to throw the ball time after time after time. It's been interesting, though, because Syracuse has talked about establishing that run game. Fran Brown has talked about establishing that run game. And then McCord continues game after game to have new career highs set in pass attempts. Granted, he does throw a lot of touchdowns, and he does throw for a lot of big plays when he does throw the football. But, and this might just be me being a little negative right here, because you have to remember, Syracuse is 4-1, but Syracuse is right now 3-2 because Syracuse had a chance to be 3-2 because McCord almost threw 2 picks on that final drive against UNLV in the fourth quarter.
Oh, Bassino said there, he said they almost did that. And that's why we were
okay, but a better defense catches those.
You're definitely right. Coming into what will be the better defenses, you're coming along the lines. But I think I'm still pretty confident in how this offense is working out. Yes, I'd like it to be a lot more two-dimensional rather than just consistently airing things out. I don't love the fact of McCord consistently dropping him back. This offensive line isn't really amazing, so I don't trust them protecting him constantly. Him dropping back last week 63 times, that's 63 times for him to get hit.
Do you think he should be out of the pocket as much as he is as well? Because I think he's gotten a little too comfortable, in my opinion, sort of trying to escape the pocket and trying to be a little more mobile. I like to think he's shown us more mobileness than we all expected coming into this season as people who watch the team. But a little counterpoint is that, attempt to be mobileness sort of hurting him in a way.
I definitely don't mind the mobileness like you talked about. I think it's just adds another dimension to this offense. I mean, something Fran Brown's talked about a lot. He wants to see Little League Kyle just out there having fun, just being himself, running the ball. And I think that adds another layer to him. He hasn't taken too many big hits like Schrader used to always just take the most unnecessary hits diving for it.
Yeah, it's because he would run every which way.
Yes.
Would not slide.
And I don't think we've seen McCord come out of the pocket too much. He's usually it's not doing it by design. It's just extending plays, which is a big benefit that's something your quarterback can do for you. So I don't mind that. I just I feel like this high volume passing is just not allowing the run game to hit its flow. I mean, if you're going to throw the ball 63 times a game, that doesn't leave that many opportunities for the run game to develop, start getting itself some momentum building, which especially heading down into the deeper stretches this season when it's going to be about depth and in the trenches, you want your run game to start having a little momentum and a style to it.
The only thing I would push back against that is Syracuse's run game. It's kind of, I don't want to say non-existent at this point, but when you look at the broader scheme of this squad, LaQuint Allen is used, I think as he should, as both a running back and a wide receiver. That's how he should be. He's multifaceted in the fashion that he's multifaceted in the way that you can use him as both. Yasin Willis showed us a little this past game. He's the backup for LaQuint, and it was just announced that Will Nixon's going to be out for the year. So with no Will Nixon in the fold, the next guy you have on tap is Yasin Willis. Is that what you want in terms of your run game and how you want to stack up your runners or your running backs rather than having all those receiving options like we talked about instead to go to?
Yeah, I would like a little bit more versatility on the ground game there. I think Nixon being gone, I think is actually going to be an...
Is that more for the running backs to get more of a chance to, score, or is that for McCord to get more of a rest?
It's more of McCord to get more of a rest. The further you get into the season, the more health matters because people are going to get banged up. It's football. It's a tough sport. You want your guys to get banged up, or not, you don't want your guys to get banged up, rather. But the more you have different options on offense, the less you can feed and take the damage on guys like LaQuint, who this weekend suffered another little leg injury. He's played through the rest of the game. But if you have these more options as running backs, it's just less hits for your guys as a whole. But in terms of the overall volume from McCord, it's not something I'm too concerned with because we haven't seen too many negatives to it quite yet. Yes, it's been a little one-dimensional, but the offense has still been pretty good. I mean, they've been putting up points, 44 points on the road last week. I mean, honestly, I'm not opposed to it, but honestly, let's hear what Fran Brown has to say about Kyle McCord's high volume of quarterback.
College football to me is becoming like the NFL if you watched everything all weekend, and we have a really good quarterback. So our quarterback's going to give us a chance at the end. We'll always have a chance because of Kyle, and I think that's why he's one of the better quarterbacks in the country, because he's really good at situational football. All the other stuff, anybody can do those things, but when you get down to our situational football, if you've been watching us throughout the year, he's done a really good job. So
I'm a big believer in what he's saying there is obviously the college game transitioning a lot to the pro game as being a passing volume thing, but the biggest point he made to me is having a quarterback like Kyle McCord, which is why it was so big getting him out of the portal, gives you a chance at every single game that you play.
Well, okay. Here's what I'm going to say before I say anything again. McCord has the stats to back up everything Fran Brown just said. This is a guy that leads the nation in completions. This is a guy that has 17 touchdown passes, which ranks second nationally to only Cam Ward. He's fourth in the nation in passing yards. He's second in yards per game. He also has the most interceptions in the ACC. He's got 6 of them.
Which I think is kind of a double-edged sword with the interceptions, completions. A lot of it comes from the high volume in attempts. There's so many opportunities for him to do these things. That's kind of how it leads to it.
I mean, it's not anything against McCord, but there is just no world where a quarterback can throw that many passes and not throw a pick every once or two times a game.
Yep, I'm with you on that. But there's also no world in which we don't cover the NC State game coming in tomorrow.
There's not?
Unfortunately not, but we're going to do that just in a little bit. We're going to talk to our play-by-play guy, Tyler Aiken. He'll join us in a few moments, but we're going to take a quick break here on WAER.
Hi, this is David Gans, host of the Grateful Dead Hour, the weekly audio postcard from the wide musical world of America's best-loved band. Join me for the Grateful Dead Hour Saturday afternoons at 5 on WAER, your local NPR station from Syracuse University.
TGIF. You know what that stands for? Thank Griffin, it's Friday.
Nice.
We're back here on SportsNite. Griffin Marcy and Max Gifford here with you. We're excited to keep breaking down. We talked some Syracuse football in their last contest against UNLV. We're now going to get to their game this Saturday. That's tomorrow against NC State. That's an 8 o'clock kick. A little later of a game in what is a very stacked college football slate. But of course, I guess the schedulers knew that Syracuse-NC State would be just the best game on this schedule by far.
No question about it.
Right? I mean, that's what other people are saying.
That's what the people are saying.
That's what the people are saying. Well, someone else saying stuff. That's Tyler Aiken. He's going to be on the call tomorrow for WAER. He's down in Raleigh right now. Tyler, how's it hanging down in Raleigh?
It's going great down in Raleigh. Just came back from having some empanadas and barbecue with my fellow broadcaster, Andrew Selliver. So we're doing great.
That sounds really good. Did you guys hit a Waffle House yet while you're down there?
We have not hit a Waffle House yet. I think we're going to go Cookout instead of Waffle House as a post-game meal tomorrow.
Oh, sounds good. I like the barbecue selection, big North Carolina pulled pork situation down there.
Yeah, I actually went with a little bit different than that. Andrew got pulled pork, so Andrew got that barbecue pulled pork like you wanted him to. I actually got a pimento sandwich. Very good. Love pimento cheese.
Well, TA, I know how much you know your food, but another thing you probably know a lot about is this NC State football team. Let's get to some more details on that squad. So one of the biggest storylines coming into this game is Grayson McCall, the quarterback for this Wolfpack squad. And the big storyline is he's questionable. He's up in the air right now. I mean, he's a veteran. He did a lot of good things at Coastal Carolina, but he got hit pretty hard this past week, and he's had some concussion problems in the past. So I guess in your opinion, looking at this game from a broad scope, sort of looking at this game, how does NC State succeed with or without Grayson McCall in the fold?
Yeah, I mean, just to give anyone listening a full timeline, McCall's a transfer from Coastal Carolina, missed the last 6 games of last season with a concussion, then was out with what technically wasn't a disclosed injury, but was out for some spot time earlier in the year. And then last week is when he went to the hospital with a concussion and has since been released from the hospital. We're not 100% sure if he's been cleared to play. Syracuse football head coach Fran Brown has been big on, he's going to be ready to play, but that's what he has to say as a coach. He has to be ready for anything. I think it's a tough path to victory for the Wolfpack, to be quite honest, regardless of who the quarterback is. McCall has had a fairly rough start to the year, but the much more likely starter, true freshman C.J. Bailey, he's struggled this year. He's been fairly accurate, completion percentage around 65%, but he's only thrown 4 touchdowns compared to 3 interceptions. So he's had some of those rookie mistakes, and he's just not a threat to run. His longest rush on the season is 12 yards. The quarterbacks that have given Syracuse problems this year, you think to Haj Malik Williams of UNLV, you think to Haynes King of Georgia Tech, those are guys that can do multiple things. And Grayson McCall wasn't too much of a threat to run early in this season specifically. And C.J. Bailey, I understand he has 2 rushing touchdowns, but he is not a true running threat. And so that's going to make it a very one-dimensional offense regardless of who's under center for the Wolfpack.
Well, Tyler, you talked about, he's not as much of a running threat, but he's still got a good arm. NC State has some really good weapons on the outside over there. How do you think Syracuse's defense in the secondary specifically will hold up against some of those top options on the outside for the Wolfpack?
I mean, Syracuse is set up extremely well to guard those weapons because the number one weapon, maybe not in talent, but in terms of production this year, has been actually the tight end for the Wolfpack, Justin Jolie, and he's very similar in terms of play style, maybe not build, but play style, to Oronde Gadsden. Syracuse knows how to pressure tight ends defensively, so I don't think he's going to be too much of a problem. The X factor of this game is KC Concepcion. That's the star wide receiver for the Wolfpack. He was an All-American for freshman last year. He broke pretty much every Wolfpack rookie receiving record. He's been all right this year, just 37 receptions, not even 300 yards yet. He's got 4 touchdowns. It's been a solid year, and for most receivers, that would be a great year, but it feels like he's just scratching the surface. So he is going to be an X factor because when you have a true freshman at quarterback, I understand Concepcion is just a sophomore, but he needs to be that veteran, that leader in the receiving room that's always providing a safety blanket for Bailey at quarterback.
So what you're saying here is that NC State is going to win this game through the air rather than on the ground.
I think, offensively, probably more likely through the air. When it comes to winning the game overall, I think the Wolfpack's best route to victory is causing a bunch of turnovers because NC State does a pretty good job of that. 11 forced turnovers on the season, 6 interceptions, and 5 forced fumbles. Both of those rank pretty well within the ACC and within the country. And Kyle McCord has thrown 5 interceptions over the last 3 games. And so NC State's best bet is to force the throw from McCord and then try to cause problems, try to create turnovers and flip the field from there. The defense for the Wolfpack is going to matter a lot more than the offense.
I just ask about the potential for NC State to run because the news came out today that Tank Wilson and Kevin Jobity Jr. are likely out for the rest of the season. So not having them in the fold, I feel like NC State may be prone to running a little more than they might have.
It's possible. I mean, to be quite honest, Syracuse's defensive line was disappointing and nerve-wracking for fans even before those injuries. You look at the top 9 tacklers on Syracuse's defense, 6 are defensive backs, 2 are linebackers, and just 1, Fadil Diggs, was on that defensive line. So it's not like those Syracuse defensive tackles were preventing the run or doing a good job of preventing the run anyways. Now, there will be a lot less depth on the defensive line that will hurt both the pass rush and probably the run defense a little bit more. You're absolutely right. But Syracuse's run defense was a concern for me before. I don't know how much worse it could really get from there. Syracuse was a bottom 20 run defense in the country coming out of last week.
And so, Tyler, you mentioned a little bit there, the defense for the Wolfpack is going to be a big key factor in this game. It's a Wolfpack unit that's really been not very good.
It's not good.
No, it's not good.
It's bad. Legitimately the worst in the ACC. 34 points allowed per game, the highest amount of points allowed by any defense. And this is a defense that, let's keep in mind, in terms of scoring defense, was top 30 in the country for each of the last 3 seasons. I understand they lost a lot of talent, but you guys are absolutely right. It's not the greatest defense in the world. NC State's defense has been bad this year.
Yeah, well, they got 50 bombed twice this year, and they allowed 34 to Wake Forest last week.
So they've proven that against Power 4 competition, it can get pretty ugly. And Syracuse has kind of shown on offense that they can put up points with the best of them.
Syracuse's offense has been phenomenal. Kyle McCord just today was announced by, now let's keep in mind, Robert Griffin III, just an analyst who doesn't, have much sway in voting, but he said McCord's one of his top 5 Heisman picks this year. He has been legit in every sense of the word in terms of just pure volume. He's been throwing the ball a ton, 63 passes last week against UNLV, but he's turned it into touchdowns. His completion percentage has been pretty solid. He's distributed the ball pretty well. Syracuse's offense has been scary in pretty much every single game this year. Even the quote-unquote bad performances have still been good for Syracuse's Stanford's offensively.
Well, something about people with the name Griffin in there, they always sound so smart. But you're talking about you made a brief mention about the volume. That's something we talked about earlier in the show. I want to get your take on it. The consistent volume of Kyle McCord, where are you at on that? Because Max and I are a little bit concerned. I want to know where you're at with that.
Statistically, you are more likely to make mistakes, throw interceptions, have catastrophic passing plays when you pass it that much. That's just naturally going to happen. I'm not as concerned with how much McCord is throwing in terms of, I don't want McCord to get tired. I don't want McCord to make mistakes. I just think Syracuse raises its floor and raises its ceiling when LaQuint Allen is getting the ball a lot, and you saw that last week when he had 4 touchdowns against UNLV. I think, quite frankly, he's been getting the ball a disrespectfully low amount of times. Holy Cross, he only had 8 rushing attempts. Stanford was around that mark as well. It's not about passing too much. It's about rushing too little, in my opinion, because there's going to be some games later throughout the season where Syracuse is going to need to fight for time of possession. It is going to need to try to win a slow-moving game in the trenches. And if LaQuint Allen hasn't been given enough opportunities to do that throughout the year, then I don't know if it's going to be a trustworthy option later in the year. So I'm with you guys that it is a little bit of a concern. I'm not worried about overusing McCord. I'm worried about underutilizing the running options Syracuse has, especially Allen.
Well, I hope we're not overusing Tyler Aiken's brain. He's on the call tomorrow for WAER, showing off his vast knowledge about NC State. If you want to get involved in the conversation, though, make sure to interact with us on our text line, 315-556-3929. You can also interact with us on social media, on our X at WAER Sports Talk, and tune into our YouTube live stream. That's also at WAER Sports Talk on YouTube. Tyler, you're going to be down at Carter Finley Stadium tomorrow. It's a place Syracuse hasn't won since 2013. And it was funny, the head coach today for NC State made a comment about how potentially the night game will get their fans, rowdy. They'll have the whole day to spend, we're doing whatever they want, maybe indulging in some beverages that only adults can drink. But he said, maybe it'll actually help them stand up for third downs. Does the environment of NC State this season scare you at all?
Not really. Let's keep in mind, what does a sellout actually mean? A sellout means
Syracuse sold out Holy Cross.
Yeah,
Holy
that's a
Cross's
great
game
example.
against Syracuse was quote-unquote sold out. That might be the most sparsely attended game that Syracuse has had all season long. And so keep in mind, every ticket has been sold, but it is fall break for NC State this weekend, and so you might have a slightly smaller student section later in the day. I don't know how that's going to impact it. There's a great slate of other college football games, so maybe people will be late to trickle in. At the end of the day, it's an ACC game with a loyal fan base. I'd say at the very least, the stadium's going to be 75% full. And it's going to be definitely different than the environment at Allegiant Stadium last year, which only had people in the lower bowls. Obviously, that's an NFL stadium, so it's a little bit of a different deal. It will be the biggest road environment Syracuse plays in maybe on the year. I really don't know for sure how that's going to play out the rest of the year, but I'm not worried in terms of Syracuse getting too scared of the bright lights in front of a sellout crowd. I think that's not going to be the case at all.
Especially with guys like you have a leader in Kyle McCord, quarterback. He's played in the Big House. He's played in Columbus. He's played in these large stadiums, these large venues from his time in the Big Ten. I'm not personally too concerned with the atmosphere down in Raleigh, but it is a team in NC State. They're 25-5 at home over the last 5 seasons, so they're not known to let these home games slip through the cracks. So I think could be interesting. I think the environment was a little bit underrated, honestly, in terms of your opinion.
And
there.
Syracuse is not.
Well, I mean,
Syracuse has not been good on the road.
Yeah, Syracuse hasn't been good on the road with a previous coach. You can't really make an assessment of what Fran Brown's teams are like on the road. And then also keep in mind, this is not the same Wolfpack team that it's been the past few years. It's been a perennial 8 or 9 win team over the last few years. This is a 3-3 Wolfpack team that does not look all that good. Could miss a bowl game this year. That is a totally legitimate possibility with a bunch of conference games left to play for NC State. And so the 25-5 at home record over the last 5 seasons is a product of NC State has just been a good team over the last 5 years. This is the worst team NC State has had in that same span. And so it's going to be, a decent environment, but I think it's clearly a worse team, and so that home record is not really as scary as the numbers at least indicate to you.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, you already did see them lose at Wake Forest, but I just feel like this is a team that's starting. I think the new quarterback, I almost don't want to draw a comparison to back in the day of just what it was 2 years ago when Cade Klubnik energizes the team. Quarterback.
Please. Did you just compare Cade Klubnik
I'm just the concept of the backup quarterback coming in and energizing the team.
But that was a mid-game substitution. He knows he's going to be in the game most likely, and Syracuse is game planning for C.J. Bailey. To make sure I understand you correctly, you think that the NC State fans will be more into the game because C.J. Bailey is in as the backup quarterback?
Not officially believing that. I think that's just a possibility, just looking at the difference.
You're comparing him to a 5-star rated Cade Klubnik?
Oh, Cade Klubnik hasn't exactly lived up to that, but I just think it's just looking at the different possibilities.
He certainly lived up to that against Syracuse.
Well, that's against Syracuse back in the day, but I just think it's a possibility of the crowd rallying behind its team in general, and a team that's struggled a little bit but still has some fight in them as they do.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I think, if anything, you'd imagine a guy who's battled through injuries and transferred in as a 3-time all-conference player from Coastal Carolina. I think the crowd would rally more around him. But it doesn't matter how much the crowd is rallying around a team when they've got the worst scoring defense in the ACC. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't really care how loud they are. Syracuse's offense is still probably going to walk all over NC State's defense.
I was going to say, so Tyler, you don't seem very confident at all that NC State will have any sort of success in this game.
Listen, I think there's 2 kind of main routes that this game could go. Syracuse's offense dominates NC State's defense and the Orange win comfortably, or Syracuse tries the aerial attack and NC State causes a ton of turnovers and then the Wolfpack get a win. I don't really see a slow, grinded-out win for Syracuse as a real possibility in this game, just because NC State's main course of action, main way of winning will be dominating that turnover battle and flipping the field that way. Syracuse's main way to win this game is just doing what it does best against the worst defense in the conference. So I'm not too concerned that it'll be a close game that Syracuse could lose. What I am saying is that if Syracuse does lose, it'll be an ugly game with probably multiple interceptions and maybe some fumbles as well.
Well, to me, I think something I'd look for in this game is something you hit on earlier is getting a little bit more LaQuint Allen involved. And I think that if you got out ahead, like you mentioned, if they start really running all over or stomping all over them through the air, that's when you could get that little segment of getting the offense flowing a little bit with LaQuint Allen. Does that sound like something that you think could happen in the future of that game tomorrow?
I want it to happen. I don't think it will happen. I think if it was going to happen, it would have happened already. Syracuse is 5 games into this season, and LaQuint Allen was trusted somewhat last game, but he was honestly used more as a receiver. He had 9 catches against UNLV. And Fran Brown has been asked several times throughout the season, why is LaQuint Allen not being established as a true ground-and-pound threat this season, even though he claimed before the season he wanted Allen to have 1,500 rushing yards. And his answer every time has been, it's an RPO-style offense, and I guess McCord is just being forced into a pass. He's not really given any indication that he wants to run the ball more with Allen. I'd like it to happen, but until I see it, I'm not going to expect it.
So I just feel like the momentum last week you talked about, he got entrusted a little bit, but last week, 19 attempts on the ground, and you had 4 touchdowns. I feel like that's something they're going to want to build upon. I mean, yes, we obviously saw the McCord passing attempts, but something about this game tells me that you can just start churning out the yards eventually. If you get up early, get some momentum through the air, once you get later in the game, you can start avoiding keeping that clock running once you got that lead going and start feeding LaQuint Allen.
Listen, I very much hope that's the case. But 19 rushing attempts in one game, that's not a crazy amount. That's not like anything LaQuint Allen's not capable of. It's a lot given what he's done this season compared to 8 rushing attempts in a game. But that's kind of what should be the average LaQuint Allen workload in terms of rushing offense. Syracuse could do more and should do more, but I don't really expect that. And against NC State's defense, that's probably not a problem. But moving forward, you look at that last game of the regular season against a team like Miami, then Syracuse is going to want to make sure it's figured out how it's going to use its rushing attack by then.
Well, Tyler Aiken hopes that Syracuse gets to use LaQuint Allen a lot more, especially if the Orange bump up the score early. And we also hope, Tyler, you have a great call tomorrow. Thanks for hopping on tonight.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, and make sure you tune into the double overtime after tomorrow's game. Andrew Sulliver, the other play-by-play broadcaster, he'll be hopping on to break down the game with Austin Barrick and Jordan Leonard. Just a lot of good coverage of this game still to come this weekend.
I mean, that's just going to be bad takes spewing left and right. The good news is you still have Griffin and I for the next 20-ish minutes here on Sports Night, and we're up against one last break here, and I didn't hear no bell. But it is the midterm here at Syracuse University.
Oh, don't remind me.
And so, therefore, I know Griffin's gone through. He's having a little PTSD right now from his test this last week. But the good news is we're going to hand out our grades on every other sport around campus when we come back on WAER.
Barry, answer the phone.
I'm Jesse Thorne. The voice you're hearing is that.
This music is bumping. I wish you guys in the audience could see our engineer, Austin Barrick, dancing around in the studio. It really gets me excited.
I'm dancing too right now.
Oh, well, perfect.
I'm into it.
We're having a pretty much dance party here, which, it's what we all need. It's a long week. It's midterms right around the corner here at Syracuse University, Max. I don't know about you, but it's been a stressful couple days.
Yeah, unfortunately, my report card, not the best right now. But you know what? We still have half a semester to go, so we'll be fine.
No, you're halfway there. That's all that matters.
Exactly.
They say C's get degrees anyways, so you're all good.
C's get degrees? Is that what we're going with here?
That's the term I live and die by.
Okay.
But regardless of that, we talked midterms, and most of these fall sports are getting around halfway through the season. We're halfway through the semester, so we're going to go through and grade what we've seen so far from a couple of the Olympic teams around the hill here. And we're going to start first with Syracuse men's soccer, a team that started off the year pretty okay, just 2 years removed from a national title. Some might say a little disappointing. You're coming in at 6-4-3 right now. Max, what grade are you giving the orange soccer team?
You let off this block saying C's get degrees, right? To me, C is an average grade.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, this Syracuse men's soccer team has been very below average. So I'm giving them a D. I don't know if that's harsh, but in my opinion, C is average. They have not been average this season. They have not been a good soccer team. And considering you are 2 years removed from the national championship, understand there's lots of turnover that happens in soccer. But let's keep in mind, this is an orange team that lost to Lemoyne, who is only in their second year of Division I soccer.
That's bad.
And you're so you're going to tell me that anything above a D is more suitable when they lost to Lemoyne?
I'm a little bit more positive on the team.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a C+ from what I've seen so far. So you're a little bit more on the negative side, but to me, it's this last little win streak they're on. They've won three in a row. Two of them have been on the road. I'm really starting to feel some momentum coming back to this team. Coming forward, you just beat Albany on the road. Obviously, not a huge win.
The Orange did get their first ACC win against Notre Dame.
Yes.
I'll give them some credit. You had to get that ACC win out of the way. That's probably the reason they're not an F in my book.
Getting the ACC win against Notre Dame, beating Providence, the momentum's starting to build for head coach Ian McIntyre's squad. That's why I feel like, yes, C+ might be a little generous, but I've seen enough to believe that this team can continue to go forward in the right direction.
The thing that still rubs me the wrong way about this men's soccer team is the fact that you've got Nicholas Kaluki, and a guy that was supposed to be the stalwart for your squad has kind of been non-existent in terms of scoring. Now, lots of other guys have stepped up to the plate, and especially in their first or second starts, they've been really impressive. Gabe Threadgold has been a guy that's been really fun to watch for this Orange squad. He's been getting active. He's been agile. He's been finding those angles and creases to get goals. But when you have some of those veterans, especially on a team that doesn't necessarily have a lot of veterans, and are relying on Tomas Hutt, a guy that wasn't supposed to play this year, but Jaheim Wickham, because he got hurt, he was in the starting spot last year and did a great job. He can't fill that void this year. So Syracuse men's soccer is a very young squad. I'll give them a lot of credit for that, because they have to deal with so much turnover. And Coach Mack has said it himself, it sucks to lose these games. Nobody wants to lose these games to Lemoyne. Nobody wants to lose to Cornell 3 years in a row. That's just not the philosophy of Syracuse men's soccer, especially after they were so dominant the last 2 years.
And so we've talked about, given our grades for the men's soccer team. Let's get over to the women's soccer team. Now sitting at 6-7-1, but on a 6-game losing streak. Max, I'll let you start this one.
You start this.
You want me to get this one?
Because
I'm a little more positive. Again, I think it's just kind of the theme here is I'm a more positive guy.
This might be a long segment.
I'm giving them a B. You start
B?
As a B. You start the season undefeated.
Are you saying B as in bear, or are you saying V as in very not good?
B as in bear. Well, I'm giving you this grade because you start the season off, you're undefeated through 7 games. Yes, you've lost your last 6 in a row, but I'm looking at last year.
Notice how he whispered that, like, notice they've lost their last 6 in a row, but...
Well, that's what you do in debate. You just hide the bad negatives points of it. But if you look at last year, this team finished 2-14-2. You talk about the progress they've made from point A to point B. It's been tremendous. You started this season off really well. Yes, it's been a really bad stretch as of late, but you got to compare it to what you saw in the seasons past when they last year just not a good team.
There was only one way to go after last season, and it was up.
No. They had 2 wins. They could have gone down.
Oh, okay, I guess so. But again, it was one of their worst seasons. I think the only season worse is you could go back to that COVID season where they might have only had 1 win. So not the worst season in team history. There's another team on this list that did have their worst season in program history. But you mentioned it, very solid non-conference slate. Now, did they play as good of competition as you could in a non-conference slate? Maybe not, but you picked up the wins when you needed it.
You can't complain about who you're playing as long as you're taking care of
but
business.
But Syracuse has still not won an ACC game in over 2 seasons. The last time they won it was September of 2022 against Miami. So I'm giving this women's soccer team a C+. Remember,
we're not that far off.
Remember, my grading system is average. So C is average. I'm giving them a little bit above average for where I thought they would be this year. I think Nikki Adams and co. have done a really good job revamping the squad. There's a lot of people that are returning, and of course you've got Shea Vanderbosch, who's always just been so good in net over the past 3 years, and the fact that she continues to put on performances like that game in and game out, and the fact that she has stayed around at Syracuse on a team that, well, has not been that good, and she has faced so much volume, really speaks to her character. And I think this women's soccer team definitely more on the rise than we think, but to me, they still need to prove a little more in ACC play.
Which, yes, you mentioned it's just not something they've done in years past. I do think they'll get it figured out, pick up a win or 2 in conference play to finish out the season. The final record probably won't look as
well. They've only got about 4 games to do it. So
I just don't think the conference, or like we talked about, the conference record's going to look pretty bad. I don't think it's as indicative as how bad this season might look at the end of the year numbers-wise. I think overall, like I said, big steps in the right direction from last year.
It's interesting, the men's and women's soccer ACC tournament, they only take 6 teams in the tournament, but for the NCAA tournament, they're 64. Talking to some sources sort of around the school, they mentioned that technically, if Syracuse women's soccer wins out, they could be in the conversation for the NCAA tournament.
Well, then we'd be having a whole different grade.
Well, because it is 64 teams. Now, do I think they win all 4 of those? Unfortunately, no. Just because I don't think they've shown the ability to consistently play against these ACC opponents for years and years. I mean, it's been since like the early 2000s that they got a ranked win. And the ACC is very good soccer-wise.
Do you think the ACC or NCAA has office hours they could go to and maybe improve their grade? Like the extra credit?
Not a good pun. Not a good pun to bring in the
even
office
a pun,
hours
just
puns. All right, well, regardless, office hours or not, Griffin gives women's soccer a B. I give them a C+. Again, not too far off there. Let's go to a team that is arguably the most prominent team on this campus, and I say that because they are the highest ranked. That's Syracuse field hockey, number 14 in the nation coming into this week. They've been sort of around that 15 mark the last couple of weeks, but then picked up 2 ranked wins a week ago against Louisville and Princeton. Today had a game most recently. I was lucky to be at that contest when they faced Stanford, beat the Cardinal 3-0. I mean, what's crazy, Stanford has lost 3 straight games to ACC competition, 3-0. But Griffin, their only 3 losses this year have come against top-ranked North Carolina, number 12 Duke, and an Ohio State team that was also ranked in the top 15 at the time.
So here's what I'm thinking, is I'll be a little bit more on the negative side this time. I'm going to give you a B+.
B+?
Whereas they're starting to move in a little bit more in the right direction, like we talked about.
This is a top 15 team in the nation, Griffin.
But I don't see them getting much higher than that. I don't see them reaching into the top 10, the top 8, or whatever their climax may be. I don't think that they have the potential to do that. It's kind of where they've been living around the last couple of years, is that top 15 range. And I just don't think they can reach that next step, which is why, to me, they're not hitting the A mark.
So I think a year ago I would have potentially agreed with you. Syracuse was sort of around that top 10, maybe just outside that top 10 a year ago. But the biggest issue was they couldn't win at home. Go back all the way to the game they played against Virginia a couple years ago, or last year. They lost in double overtime. That snapped a 13-game home win streak. After that, they didn't win a single game at home. They lost to Ohio State at home. The next win at home didn't come until they played Lafayette a couple weeks ago, or Northeastern a couple weeks ago. So having those 2 wins under your belt, I think, really sort of set a fire. And then you also couple that with the fact that they got shut out against UNC, a team that has been perennially one of the best in field hockey. They have back-to-back national championships. Lynn Farquhar said it was a wake-up call for her squad. I mean, you can't learn everything in a single game or a single week. But they started to figure out, they don't want to be embarrassed like that, and started to figure out things a little more offensively. Now, I will push back a little on my own self, because Stanford was picked to finish last in the ACC, and they haven't been that good at all this year. They have a good amount of returners, but they have a lot of injuries plaguing them. They really rely a lot on their goaltender. So that's why I'm giving Syracuse Field Hockey an A-. I feel like that's pretty fair for a team that's ranked top 15 in the nation, for a team that has only lost 3 games and they've all been to top-tier competition. If they continue to play how they have been, they've got 18th ranked Cal on the docket this Sunday. They've also got number 3 Virginia on the docket next week. That game's going to be tough to win. Syracuse hasn't beaten them in over 10 tries. But if they can at least win one of those 2 games and then win a couple in the ACC tournament, I think this is a Syracuse team that could potentially go back to the NCAA tournament for another year.
I think, once again, they could go to that NCAA tournament. But you mentioned, lighting a fire under them after the North Carolina loss, where they lost 5-0. But then you go to your next big test against Duke, and you lose that one as well.
But that was in penalty strokes.
It was. But I just need you to get over that hump of that next tier. Because, yes, you just picked up those 2 wins against Louisville and Princeton, 2 top 15-ish teams. But there's like a tier break for me there.
Okay.
From that top 15 to that top 10. And I just don't think they can quite jump into that next level, which is why they're not jumping into that A gap for me. But that's enough of field hockey.
Oh, man.
I know you're a big field hockey guy. But let's go over to the volleyball team. A team that's...
This is a team, when you talk about tiers, this is when you get into the ACC tier talk, because Syracuse performed very well in non-conference play this year. They went 12-0. Remember, this team only won 2 games last year, Griffin. It was the worst season in program history.
Yes.
But ACC play has been pretty brutal to them, similar to Syracuse women's soccer. Haven't won a game yet in ACC play, have only won 1 set. To me, it's a much better improvement from last year because you weren't beating a lot of these non-conference opponents you played last year. So I got volleyball at like a B- just because you still have that tier that you can't. I'm sorry, you're not going to compete with number 1 Pitt. It's just it's too tough of a task. Pitt's gone to the Final Four for the last couple of years. They had a girl with 12 service aces in 1 game. I think Syracuse's a total in ACC play might have 12 service aces, maybe not even.
So I'm on the big positive, big bright side from this team here. I'm going to put them, first time we're cracking this scale out, an A-.
Oh.
I'm getting into the A range here. Just because...
Well, I gave field hockey an A-.
You're right. It's the first time for me hitting the A range. But to me, it comes down, like I said, to the improvement. Last year, you go 2-24.
That's not good.
No, or 2-26 rather. That is
good.
Really not good. You lost the final 18 games of your season. You start this year, you win your first 12. I mean, you can't ask for much better than that.
Already 6 times the amount of wins you had last year.
Exactly right. Yes.
Granted, you didn't play NJIT in Lemoyne for 4 of those.
Yes, but you're taking advantage of what's in front of you. Yes, starting in conference play right now, it just objectively has not been pretty. I mean, you've won, like you said, 4 games. You've won 1 set against Duke. That's not a good stat, right? But you just improved so much from last year that you see so much coming in the right direction. Now you're at 12-4. Continue to find something maybe in conference play. Start picking up some momentum. This record at the end of the season could look a lot better. It's going to look nothing like 2-26 last year. So that's why I'm big on the positive, giving them an A- on this one.
So Griffin gives them an A-. I got Syracuse volleyball. He gives them an A-. I got them at a B-. Let's look a little forward. Our next broadcast is tomorrow. You don't have to wait too long, folks. We have our countdown to kickoff at 7:30 before game time at 8 against NC State. That's Andrew Selver and Tyler Aiken will have the call for you there. And then the double overtime until 1 a.m.
It's going to be a late night.
That's past my bedtime. Austin Barrick and Jordan Leonard taking you through there. Again, we really appreciate you tuning in to Sports Night on WAER Syracuse. Some thank yous to hand out before we go. Our producer, Jonah Weintraub, doing great work. Our engineer, Austin Barrick, you'll hear him tomorrow, just giving bad takes as always. And then our WAER Sports Talk desk, Ben Chadwick and Griffin Bloomstein, always appreciate their work as well. But until then, for Griffin Marcy, I'm Max Gifford saying good night and enjoy the game tomorrow, everyone.